Greetings, I'm Dr. Max Gomez at the Fifth International Vatican Conference, and I am joined now by Julien Musolino, who will give us his insights on the merging of science, faith, and the physical body. Julien, let's start with, as we all do, we go to many of these kinds of scientific conferences, and one of the things that is always noteworthy is how narrowly focused they are. They're focused on a kidney or a liver or the brain or a particular disease. This is very different, this Vatican conference. What's the value of that, do you think?
Yeah, hi. First, it's a pleasure to be with you. I think you're right. I think that many conferences are very narrow. I'm not in the medical field myself, so I don't go to medical conferences, but I think it's true in general. The problem is that we now face, as a species, problems that are global. We're in the middle of a global pandemic right now, and we have a climate crisis. And these global problems call for global solutions, call for partners from different parts of culture, different industries. And I think what makes this Vatican conference so wonderful is that it really does bring together a really interesting and eclectic group of people, scientists, faith leaders, believers, non-believers, private industry, people who've been involved in politics. And I think that's exactly the right way to think about and to tackle complex problems.
In this kind of setting, the soul is often one of the areas that is brought up, its existence and what it is and where it is, if you will. Your research kind of calls in question the traditional concept of the soul. Tell me about that.
Yes, of course. So I'll give you a brief summary. So the first idea is that if you look at what people believe in the US and around the world, many people believe in a kind of soul that is immaterial, helps them function psychologically, and can transport their consciousness into the afterlife. So that's the traditional soul. Mm-hmm. It turns out that if you think about this kind of soul, it's not just a religious or theological notion, it's a scientific hypothesis. And if you think about it, we know how to evaluate scientific hypotheses. I think there's overwhelming evidence against such a soul. Now, this doesn't mean that we can't talk about the soul to mean something else. In fact, there are many ways to talk about the soul. But I think this kind of traditional soul that most people believe in, science has a real problem with it.
Traditional soul, that's that by itself is an interesting concept. Another term that gets tossed around somewhat is personhood. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? How would you define personhood?
Yeah, that's another interesting question. See, the trouble with commonsensical concepts is that they have no real agreed upon definition. So different people can define personhood the way they see fit, and that's perfectly fine. What I would say is that, and I'm happy with multiple definitions, what I would say is I think this has to be done, though, within the context of a number of parameters, things we know rather well. So, for example, we know that human beings, we didn't always know this, but we know that human beings are part of the natural world. We're organic creatures. We're not angels. And therefore, that means that we're subject to the laws of nature and can be studied at different levels using the laws of nature. And so whatever personhood is, it's going to have to fit within what we have learned about who we are in that regard. And another thing I would add briefly is that we are complex entities, complex organisms, and it's possible to talk about a human being at different levels. At one level, we are autonomous agents with thoughts and desires and beliefs, and that's one way to talk about a person, and fundamental rights and dignity, and that's a perfectly valid way to talk about a person. At another level, at a medical level, we're a collection of organs and tissues. And, if you want to cure the body, then you have to talk about the person at that level. And at an even more fundamental level, we're a collection of elementary particles. And so we can talk about people at different levels for different purposes, and there's nothing wrong with that. And these different ways of talking about people are not mutually incompatible. It depends who we are and what we're trying to do.
In other words, we can be more than simply an amalgamation of biochemical processes.
Of course, absolutely. Oh, yes. Thoughts and feelings and our personality are as real as our, physical nature. That's part of who we are, and of course, we can talk about that. Absolutely.
Julien Musolino, thank you so much for your insights. Lots of food for thought. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.